So today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different. I wanted to talk about my DMT experience. Kind of. So if you didn't know, DMT is a chemical that's naturally produced by the body at the time of death. But DMT is also a drug that people take in order to induce a psychedelic state and have psychedelic experiences. I myself personally did not take DMT. I don't think I have the courage to do that quite yet, or at all even, but I did do what is known as holotropic breathwork. So for those of you who don't know, holotropic breathwork is a type of breathwork that is supposed to induce this DMT-like experience naturally without having to take any drugs, because what happens is the intense breathwork exercise that you do stimulates the tissue in your lungs and it allows your body to naturally release DMT. The science on this is somewhat clear and the evidence suggests that this is true and this to be the case, but I've only looked into it so much. You can make your own decisions on that. I do not condone doing any sort of drugs or illicit psychedelics, but this is my DMT-induced experience from doing holotropic breathwork. So about a month and a half ago in Los Angeles, of course, hippie central, I went to this DMT breathwork experience workshop with one of my friends who happened to be hosting the event. Basically, I went there with another friend of mine and we laid down in Griffith Park, in nature. We laid by a waterfall and we laid down on towels and we started doing this breath work. There was an instructor there who was guiding us through the breath work, teaching us how to do it, making sure everyone was doing the exercises correctly so we could get into our state and to make sure that everyone felt safe and was okay when we did get into the DMT-induced state. So I was doing this breath work and I started to feel my body feel as though it was vibrating within 5 or 10 minutes. I felt a tingling or vibrating like feeling within my gums. It was a very strange and weird experience. But then I noticed my hands and my arms and my body start to cramp up and it felt as though I didn't have control of my body any longer. My hands cramped up like this. My arms were locked as if I was a T-Rex, and if I tried to extend them, it was as if I had no control. I was, with all of my will, trying to move my arm and it would move, maybe a few inches. My hands, my fingers were cramped up and there was really nothing I can do. And then I noticed if I would cough or if I would breathe heavy and breathe in a different way, that my body felt like it was vibrating. I could feel the vibrations of my cough. I could feel the breath in my body shifting, and it was as if my body was an Xbox controller and someone just called in an airstrike on me. My whole body was vibrating. It was an incredibly strange experience. And I felt these physical sensations for the first 5-10 minutes. About 10 minutes in is when I started to feel the physical sensations, and I felt it throughout the duration of the entire breathwork exercise. About 20 or 30 minutes in, maybe around the 20-minute mark, I started to get, for the briefest second, I started to get some colored visuals because your eyes are closed during the exercise. So I got some colored visuals, which I've never experienced before. I've never done any psychedelics or really any drugs other than alcohol ever in my life. Never smoked weed, not even a single puff. I've never done anything except for alcohol. So this was definitely a scary and anxiety-inducing exercise, which is part of the reason why I did it. And I noticed that my body cramped up and the sensations in my body and the visuals and everything I was feeling, I could feel my consciousness shifting. If that's the only way I really know how to describe it. I was entering what I imagined to be a psychedelic state, and immediately I felt extreme anxiety, a very deep-seated sense of anxiety. I began thinking about certain things in my personal life, stuff like, I have a massive, this is gonna sound funny, but I have a massive germophobia, and that was one of the first things I thought of. And I don't have like germophobia, like, I use paper towels, or, when I open the door in a public restroom, or, I don't like shaking people's hands. Like, those are all things I do, but it's a lot deeper than that. Like, this is, my germophobia is an actual real issue in my life. And it's not that it's fun to admit, but it's something that has in the past, when I was younger, back when I was in high school, it caused overwhelming anxiety and stress basically all the time for a period of time. I have it, for the most part, very under control. I understand, you know, how to deal with it and how to cope with it, but it is definitely something that comes back and forth. It is something I battle with. And it was one of the first things I thought. I suddenly felt grossed out about the environment I was in. Like my hands felt really dirty and I felt like I needed to wash them. And I had this overwhelming sense of anxiety. Like I wanted to stop the breath work. I was moving around a lot. The instructor kept coming over to me and telling me to like relax and just keep breathing. I was definitely disrupting the exercise a little bit by my heavy breathing. I was breathing extremely heavy. I was basically hyperventilating at this point. And I turned to my friend next to me and I told her, I was like I need to leave, like I need to get up, but I promised myself that no matter what, I wouldn't leave. So I pushed through it, and this strong sense of anxiety started to fade. And as I hate to sound like a stoner hippie in a van on the beach, but as my consciousness started to alter and shift, I got this overwhelming sense of just sadness. And I just began to cry out of nowhere. There was no particular reason, but I just felt like a very strong sense of defeat and sadness, and I'm still not entirely sure why. I felt this sense of defeat and sadness, and I just started crying, but it felt good to cry. It felt really good to cry. And part of me thinks that I had repressed some level of emotions or feelings from experiences in my life, whether currently or prior, and this was just those emotions and feelings coming back, resurfacing. After I cried, I still had that sense of anxiety, but after I cried, I just was overwhelmed with this immense sense of hunger. I was in starvation mode. I felt like I hadn't eaten in fucking years. So I live near Hollywood, but we were at Griffith Park, which is a little bit north of Hollywood, starting to get towards the valley, North Hollywood area. I was calculating in my mind where the closest food restaurant was, where the closest supermarket was, so I could, and I was having visions of me just, it was almost like I was having some sexual porn. The feeling of thinking about me going into a supermarket and tearing open all of the snacks and eating everything in there it felt almost sexual. Like I had this immense, strong desire to go and eat anything and everything. What I realized was that upon journaling about this later, was that my hunger is massively suppressed by my anxiety, and that I don't eat enough. As weird as this sounds, in the past month and a half since this experience, my diet and my appetite is almost doubled. I can eat way more than I could before, and I'm hungry all the time, and I feel as though I had a low-grade buzzing sense of anxiety and stress that would be going on in my life that I had become accustomed to, and it was suppressing my appetite, and it was making me not want to eat enough. In this state, I was able to see this clearly, and I just had this overwhelming sense of hunger like I hadn't eaten in fucking years. I keep turning over to my friend and I'm telling her, like, I need to go eat. Like, we gotta go to this steakhouse, like, when we get back. Like, I'm whispering this, like, probably disrupting the exercise entirely. And afterwards, she's making fun of me. She's like, you're turning to me, you're like, I want Shake Shack, or like, I want to go to the supermarket and eat all this food. It's totally absurd. But what this really triggered and led me to think about is that, why am I always so hungry? It sounds funny that I'm trying to make my hunger profound, but for me, this was a truly profound realization, that knowing that my stress and anxiety during the day that I wasn't even fully aware of was making me incredibly hungry, was making my body feel starved. I typically felt overwhelmed by things in my life. I felt overwhelmed by day-to-day activities. I felt overwhelmed by my work and my businesses. I felt overwhelmed in my responsibilities and my relationships. And I had never done anything about this feeling and sense of feeling overwhelmed. And I was just accepting of the feeling of being overwhelmed and being in an overwhelming circumstance or scenarios. And what this experience and what this psychedelic state made me realize is that it's not okay to feel overwhelmed all of the time. Feeling overwhelmed and being in an overwhelming circumstance or scenario or portion of my life, this feeling of overwhelm is a sign. This is a marker that I am doing something in my life that is unsustainable. And it's not okay to feel overwhelmed. When I feel overwhelmed, my judgment is clouded. My mental clarity, takes a dip. I'm not as sharp. I can't think of solutions or run my business as effectively as I could if I wasn't overwhelmed, if I was calm, cool, and collected. And I find that when I am calm, cool, and collected, and I am most spiritually in tune and aligned with myself, that's when I have the best ideas and the best solutions, and I feel the best, and I'm in the best state to do well for my business and just be happy as a person regardless of any sort of external circumstances. That's one of the biggest realizations I had in this experience. It was that it's not okay to be overwhelmed, because when you're overwhelmed, it's a sign that something you're doing isn't working and won't work forever. And this reminds me of a quote that Naval Ravikant says. He says, you should only be interested in that which is sustainable. You want your life to be effortless. You want things that get better over time and that you can sustain over a long period of time, because anytime you're doing something that isn't sustainable, you're subjugating yourself to a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and you're working on something that ultimately doesn't replicate or doesn't scale over time. So this made me refocus on what I'm doing in my day-to-day. This made me refocus on my spiritual practices, and this made me refocus and think about what are my objectives in my business and how am I achieving them, and am I working on the right things? Because oftentimes what you work on and working on the right things is more important than how much you work or how much effort you put in. Really, that was the biggest takeaway I had from this experience, aside from also knowing that I needed to eat way more and I was hungry all the time. I had a feeling that, my battle with my germophobia still is not won. It's an ongoing battle. It's something that needs to be in check, and an area of my life I need to give attention and focus to. I need to not be okay with overwhelming circumstances and scenarios, because that's what stresses me out and makes me fall back into my unhealthy germophobic-like ways, and it makes me, suppresses my appetite from the stress and anxiety that I feel. But also that the fact that I cried and felt this sense of defeat seemingly out of nowhere made me realize that maybe there are emotions and feelings that I was repressing. Being able to not have repressed emotions and being able to deal with my emotions as they come and be okay with them is something that I continually need to work on, and is clearly not in the best place possible. So that was my experience with DMT breathwork. I hope this is helpful to some of those who are interested in doing similar breathwork exercises. Again, I'm no scientist, I'm not a doctor. You should do your own research before throwing yourself into any of these things. It was definitely scary. I was definitely very nervous going into it, but ultimately I think it was an experience that was very eye-opening. I had a lot of discoveries that helped me on my personal development journey, and it is an experience I will be doing again at the next possible opportunity. So if you guys like this video, then I highly suggest you follow me on Instagram at Benjamin Seda. I post on there about men's fashion, lifestyle, productivity, stoicism, stuff like this. And if you like this as well, you should also sign up for my newsletter, where I talk about business, productivity, stoicism, and all that other fun stuff. So if you like those things, check them out. I'm gonna go eat some food and hang out with my videographer. So I'll see you guys very soon.